right, everybody. Hello and welcome back to our second session. For those of you new here, I'm Matthew Thompson, Assistant Professor of Voice at the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance. And I am the track co-chair along with Dana Plank, who is watching from afar in Ohio. If you are interested, we have some flyers up here. The Journal of Sound and Music and Games is looking for submissions. Those should also be in your swag bag, but I have extras if you missed that. And finally, it is my pleasure, without further ado, to introduce Eric Yee, composer and instructor of Video Game Music Boot Camp, who will do a talk about writing Japanese video game music. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm a composer, performer, and educator based in San Francisco, and also mentor at the International Game Developers Association. I compose primarily film, game, and classical music, and I'm finishing up my last year at San Francisco State University as a music major. Today, I'm going to be discussing how to approach studying video game music and some of the essential exercises game composers should know about. I'm going to start off by offering two arguments. First, we should study video game music literature, just as we do with jazz and classical music. In classical curriculums, we have music history, theory, and technique courses, and in jazz curriculums, we have jazz harmony, composition, and history courses. So for us as game composers, we should be doing the same thing and studying video game music because our genre has its own body of masterworks. Secondly, I think we as Western composers should better understand Japanese video game music because a lot of the greatest and most iconic works in our genre are actually from Japan, and we should know about the best works of our genre. Game audio pedagogy is still a relatively new field, and we're probably where jazz was a couple decades ago when it comes to teaching the technical craft and study of game composition. In general, there is a void when it comes to formal courses examining VGM because study scores aren't always accessible. To fill that void, I taught a first-of-its-kind course called Writing Japanese Video Game Music at SF State a year ago. It was a 15-week course where we studied a soundtrack each week and dug deep into the literature. And we did the sort of in-depth analyses and compositional exercises you typically find in a classical or jazz course. We went through 12 soundtracks and 150 tunes, and it was an extensive survey of many different styles of video game music, both popular and niche titles. And this past summer, I offered the Video Game Music Bootcamp online, where we went through the same curriculum in a month. We studied over 80 tunes from 20 different composers in a 4-week period, and I had students from across the United States and even an international student, but a lot of them were from Berklee College of Music. The response for the course was really positive because this is the kind of training that a lot of students and composers are hungry for. Now, how do we study video game music? I'm going to show you the 3 methods we used in my courses, and they are lead sheets and piano sheet music arrangements, form charts, and MIDI transcriptions. As with jazz, we have to rely on fan-made lead sheet transcriptions because official note-for-note scores are hard to come by. We study video game music lead sheets the same way we would with jazz lead sheets, analyzing the form, harmony, and melody. We also have piano sheet music arrangements, which can be either fan-made or found from official publications. They can be just as useful as lead sheets, especially if they include chord symbols. And then we have form charts. It's something I've derived from my classical studies, where we study the whole structure of a sonata or concerto laid out in a single chart. This format is uniquely suited for certain types of video game music, where the piece is made up of regular 8-bar lines. And this can present complex pieces in a way that's clear and easy to grasp. And finally, we have MIDI transcriptions, which is the most detailed form of study we can get. They're usually fan-made, but they're a very valuable resource for us. The quality can vary, but ideally we would be able to study the music note for note, just like we would with a classical music score. So before we look into some music, I'm going to introduce form notation specific to video game music. We have I for intro, the ABCD sections and so forth, O for outro, and we have a dash for a loop point, because sometimes a track repeats not the entire piece, but only after a certain point, like the intro. T would be our transitional section. IA is when the intro has the same harmony as the A section, and whenever we have a T superscript, that's when a section is transposed to a new key. So these are examples of simple forms we looked at in the first week. They can get pretty complicated, but they can be reduced to the fundamental structures of IA, IAB, IABC, and IABCD. There are a lot of variations, such as a loop point after the intro being half the length of the A and B sections, or having an outro. Now we're going to look at our first tune, Secret of the Forest from Chrono Trigger. The form is IA, A prime, B, C. We have an IA section, so the intro has the same harmony as the A section, and this can be reduced to IABC form. So let's give this a listen. That's our IA section, which is the riff intro. The flute melody enters in the A section. Now the piano takes the melody and echoes what we heard. In the B section, the strings take the melody as the harmonic rhythm speeds up. C is the contrasting weak section. It's just a lonely piano and bass. Sorry, technical issue here. So some of the techniques used in this piece are an IA riff intro, changing the melody instrument, speeding up the harmonic rhythm, and a contrasting weak section. In our second week, we look at what I call long forms, which are more complicated than simple forms and its variations, and that's when we use form charts to represent the music. For example, this track is IABCDEF form, so that's 7 distinct sections that transition seamlessly in a piece. And this track from Du Prism is a palindrome structure where it goes from IABC and then it reverses to the B and A sections with those sections transposed. So as composers can get really creative with longer structures. Now we're going to use a form chart to look at Passing Through the Forest from Du Prism. And once again, we have IA, an A section, an A transpose section, a B section, which can be reduced to IAB. So here's our form chart. The form is laid out to the left side, and the key here tells us that the piece modulates from G minor to B flat minor in the transpose section. And this whole chart is made up of 8-bar lines, which can be divided into a 4-bar antecedent and a 4-bar consequent. And the arrangement notes are on the side. This piece also adds and drops layers as indicated in the grade measures, and I've also labeled the specific layers. So let's give this a listen. That's our 4-bar opening riff. transposed to B flat minor, and the clarinet takes the melody. Here's our contrasting B section where the riff and snare drop. I guess I have to do this every time now. Let me just escape this slideshow. So, as with Secret of the Forest, this piece uses the techniques such as IA riff intro, changing the melody instrument and a contrasting weak section, but additionally it transposed a section and added and dropped layers. Finally, we're going to look briefly at a MIDI transcription of Paradigm Shift from Final Fantasy. The form is IA, A prime, B, C, C prime, which can be reduced to IABC. So let's give this a listen.
We have two melodic instruments on the top, the violin and the synths, and the rest of the instruments are just the rhythm section consisting of the drums, the bass, our harmonic instrument of the string pad, and we have our string riff divided between the left and right sides. So let's give this a listen. There's a string riff intro over a stuttering bass line. Violin comes in at the A section. Now transpose up an octave. Synths take the melody in the B section over a groovy bass line. And here we have our suave C section. We have two melodic instruments on the top.
So that's a sample of the sort of analyses we do in our MIDI workshops. Now that we've looked at the ways to study video game music, I'm going to discuss the essential exercises to practice your craft. The first essential skill is analysis. We do tons of it in our classes, but I also assign regular worksheets where students do guided analyses of VGM tracks, and they're kind of like reading comprehension questions. I have them analyze lead sheets where they do the formal, harmonic, and melodic analyses, and also MIDI analyses where they have to dig into the MIDIs to study the entire arrangement and instrumentation, like the bass and drum writing. The second essential skill is transcription, which is done in both jazz and classical music. Jazz musicians transcribe their favorite solos and albums, and composers like Bach actually hand-copied out entire scores of Vivaldi to assimilate his writing style. So I have my students do all sorts of transcriptions. Here's a student sheet music transcription of Sailing Ship from Final Fantasy, and this is a harmonic transcription of Battle 3 from Octopath Traveler. And I also have my students create full-length form charts, like this one for Pokemon. And finally, here are examples of student MIDI transcriptions, where they transcribe every single note of a track. So this is Nebula Gray from Mega Man. And this is Battle with Meta Knight from Kirby Superstar. And the last essential skill is modeling. That's where you're writing a new piece of music based on an existing track as a template. So you're working closely with a piece you like to absorb a composer's compositional process. Alternatively, you could write a piece in the style of a composer using their trademark techniques, and that's something we do in both classical and jazz courses. Here's a contrafact my student wrote of the Dupersoon track that we just looked at today, and he wrote a new track using the same harmonic progression and instrumentation as the original, but he wrote his original intro riff and his original melody over this. Hope that sounded familiar. So these are the exercises we go through in my classes, and it builds up progressively to where we can apply these skills in our original compositions. Now I'm going to show an excerpt of a student work applying the compositional techniques I discussed today. The track is essentially I-ABC form, and we also have an I-A riff intro section. That's our intro guitar riff. Drums and bass layers come in. The melody comes in at the A section. And he used a bunch of techniques we used in the 3 tunes we looked at today, and this illustrates how you can apply these practical techniques into your own game compositions. So that's my crash course on how to study video game music, and here are some of my takeaways from teaching the courses. First, teaching is the best way to learn. Having to run this course a year ago forced me to learn all of this stuff before I could teach it. Second, I'd like to bring a structured and methodical approach to teaching. It's great to build from the ground up, from the simplest building blocks into advanced material, and assign exercises that progressively build your skill set. At the same time, I learned about the power of collaboration in learning. My students gave fascinating insights that deepened our collective understanding of music because everyone was looking at the same thing from a different perspective or angle. And as a teacher, I got introduced to a lot of new repertoire for my students as well. Finally, one of the coolest things was the friendships I made through the courses. Having discussed so many tunes together, workshopped each other's exercises and compositions, and even sharing philosophical discussions on music, these students have become my new friends and also strong supporters of future versions of the boot camp. And we still keep in touch and hold alumni hangouts. Overall, being an instructor for video game music has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The feedback for the course was also really positive. I had students ranging from game developers to music teachers, students, and even a professional music producer. One of my students described this course as trailblazing, and a lot of my boot camp students wish they could have taken the full 15-week course that I taught at SF State. Some of the highlights for them was deepening their understanding of form and common techniques through the musical breakdowns, and the top-down approach to studying composition. They also enjoyed the range of repertoire selections as well as the worksheets and exercises, and also the camaraderie of studying VGM together. For future versions of the bootcamp, I'm going to be trying to incorporate some wider repertoire and new popular titles into the curriculum. And based on feedback, I'm also going to include new bass and drum writing exercises specific to video game music, and possibly include collaborative group exercises like arranging each other's music. I hope this talk has provided a new framework on how to study video game music literature and composition, and that it can help promote more formal and serious study of VGM repertoire and inspire other educators. I'll be offering the Video Game Music Bootcamp again next summer and possibly hold a winter session this year. An on-demand version of my course is in the works, which I'll be releasing soon, so if you're interested in getting updates from me about when these will be offered, you can sign up for my mailing list at ericamusic.com/bootcamp. And if you're an attendee for this event, you'll get a special discount for my courses if you want to sign up for those in the future. Thank you so much for listening to my talk, and I'll be sticking around for questions.